This is me in 2013. I just gained 16 pounds over 75 days. This is me yesterday, July 2018. I just gained 20 pounds over the course of 78 days. 190 pounds on the left, 191 on the right, but I think you'll agree that I don't look exactly the same, and I definitely do not feel anywhere close to the same. Now, in both cases, I gained the weight by eating more calories than I needed to maintain my body weight, which is a low bar. I used to be obese, and I gained weight really easily. So do you put your bet on it being a food-based difference? Maybe like, omnivore versus vegan, or whole foods versus junk foods? The most obvious ways that you would measure dietary difference don't seem to cut it, because in both cases I was eating a vegan diet based around whole foods. Maybe then you'll assume that it must be down to exercise. Maybe in the first one I was just a couch potato, and in the second one I was working out really hard. But again, this explanation doesn't really cut it. I was very active during both of these overfeeding experiments. The main difference is that in terms of strength training, in 2013, I was doing a lot of barbell, CrossFit-style workouts, a lot of hardcore weight-based strength training. These days, I do most of my exercise in general and strength training in the form of partner acrobatics, throwing people through the air, and I also do a decent amount of calisthenics, getting strong with bodyweight exercise. I don't really do any of the hardcore running and endurance exercise that I did back then, so I burn fewer calories, but I'm still very active in both cases.
All right, you survived the introduction. Awesome. So before we go into this anymore, let me just say that, one, if you would prefer to read rather than watch, there's an accompanying article that gets into the details, which you can find a link to in the video notes below. And finally, if you don't want to listen to all this, because I'm going to go into some detail on certain things, you can skip ahead with the links in the video notes once again. So, why did I do this? Because it may seem crazy to someone to purposefully overfeed yourself knowing that you're going to gain weight. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that this isn't the first time I've done this. If you go back and watch that video from 2013, I very clearly tell you, oh, God, I don't want to do this again. The reason I did that back then was because I was kind of going after this zeitgeist that seemed to have gripped the vegan movement. A lot of gurus saying that you couldn't get fat on a vegan diet if it was high carb, low fat, low protein, whole foods, and you moved your body a little bit. Clearly, that is not true, and I wanted to make the point, and I made it in a pretty spectacular fashion. It's been seen like 600,000 times. I hope a few people got that message, because so many people before that were I was getting coaching clients that had gotten fat while following those programs, and then I had to help them lose the weight. It was just a waste of time. Why go all the way up and then have to go down again? But this time I was overfeeding for two reasons. One is because I personally needed to gain mass. I am really interested in partner acrobatics, and a couple of lifts I needed to do. I had maxed out what I could do neurologically in terms of gains there. I needed to put on some mass in order to get some of these really hard lifts, and I needed to add calories. So I was gonna have to do it anyway. But I wouldn't have done it anywhere near this over the top in terms of how much mass I gained if I also was not interested in testing this idea. And as you know, if you've been following me for a while, for the last couple of years, I switched from a low protein vegan diet to a higher protein vegan diet, and my health has been improved, my body composition has been improved, I feel a lot better, and I've made the point from a scientific perspective that I think that a lot of the dogmatic high carb, low protein, low fat dogma is just that. It's not supported by the science, unfortunately, and I think it's smart to eat a little more protein. So I actually aimed for what studies have looked at in terms of bodybuilders bulking and where do they get the best ratio of mass gained in terms of muscle and fat. And some of those guys go up to like 2 grams per pound of body weight. I wasn't going to go that high, but I shot for 1 gram per pound of body weight, which is the highest that I've ever consumed in my life. I probably could have gotten away with 0.8 per pound. But that's what I went for, and it was a fascinating experience. I've never had athletic performance like this before. Because in terms of energy, like way back in 2013, I was carved up then, going fine. I could run distances, whatever. But in terms of strength training, the gains that I saw every single training session were incredible. Just like, as I was training these lifts, like adding reps every single time and just getting so much stronger. And, I was putting on weight, so you'd imagine that things like, after adding 20 pounds, you'd imagine pull-ups on that bar would be a lot harder. And in fact, they were. But what would happen would be like, I'd have a workout where like I can't quite manage to do as many pull-ups. And then the next time I'm up pull-ups, even though I'm up even more weight. So it was a really crazy experience from a training perspective. I did really well athletically, and I was pretty shocked because I felt good the whole time. Clearly I put on some body fat, and it was a little bit like, oh, my guts, like, as I sit down. But compared to 2013, I was just a jiggly fat mess back then. Despite the fact that all the training I was doing, I was not putting on muscle. I felt horrible. I didn't even really feel good, just in my day-to-day life, beyond the like physical discomfort of having all that fat, but just like I just did not feel well. And now I feel pretty good. Didn't really bother me to be eating all those calories, and I can't say I really have huge complaints. It wasn't a bad experience. And I put on like, 7 pounds of fat, but that was the minority of the weight that I put on. The rest of the 20 odd pounds was all muscle, and felt pretty good to gain that muscle. So let's dive into exactly how this weight and calorie increase worked over the course of this experiment.
So I started this experiment off at 170 pounds. To maintain that, I need to eat about 1,800 to 2,700 calories per day. And if that seems low to you for my high level of activity, it is unusually low, but I have a slow metabolism. I gain weight really easily, so I can't really eat that much unless I want to get fat. So this is a large scale increase, and it was a ton of work weighing all my food every day. And if you're wondering about the gap in the middle, that is, I was teaching a workshop in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and did not bring a food scale and weigh myself and such. So for someone like me who, has gone years without eating breakfast and actually has gone months eating one meal a day, eating all this food, or preparing it and weighing it rather, was just a lot of work and very time consuming. So that was the part that I didn't really like, but eating the food, I didn't really mind. By the end of the experiment, I was averaging 3,500 calories a day, and some days I was getting over 4,000 calories, so tremendous amount of calories for me. So I wanted to see exactly what this overfeeding experiment would do to me. I mean, I knew I'd gain weight, but what sort of weight? And so I got into a bodpod and had myself tested. So according to the bodpod, and I personally think they usually underestimate body fat a little bit, but I went from 8.5% body fat to 11.3, and my lean mass declined from 91.5 to 88.7. So of the 21 pounds or so that I gained, 7 pounds, or about 34%, were fat, and about 14 pounds, or about 66%, was muscle. So if you were to approach a bodybuilder, I'm definitely not a bodybuilder or interested in bodybuilding, but if you were to ask them if in one of their bulk periods, which is kind of how they operate, if they could gain 14 pounds of muscle and only 7 pounds of fat, would they consider that good? I'm pretty sure they would say that would be excellent, to put on that much muscle in that short a period of time. And it's not like I was new, and like these are newbie gains, because I have been doing strength training for like 8 years, and my training didn't change really during the course of this from what I was doing before. The before at 170 is on the left, after at 191 is on the right. You can see that a lot of the muscle that I piled on is actually on my back and my shoulders and my triceps, which makes sense because of what I was specifically training to do, which is increase overhead pressing motion. So those are the muscles that are going to be recruited. But for the sake of completion, here is front, side, arm, and another front. So how did I hit 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight?
So I ate a lot more higher protein foods So things like more legumes, more higher protein grains, and fewer lower protein fruit like bananas, and more things like watermelon or cantaloupe, which are a little bit higher in protein if I was going to eat fruit. But certainly shifting my calories to more higher protein foods, lots of leafy green vegetables and nuts, and some types of seeds like pumpkin seeds, which are a little higher in protein, a lot of legumes. And then finally, to cap it off and allow me to hit that 1 gram per pound of body weight, 2 servings of pea protein. That was the only processed element of my diet that I changed. So how did this experiment compare to the 2013 one?
In 2013, my diet was based around raw fruits and vegetables. It was a very healthy diet in many respects, and in a time before I understood more of the nuance about controlling my colitis through other means, it allowed me to function in a way that was better than any other way that I had at my disposal. But one of the consequences was that it was extremely low in protein. But it's perfect for this comparison because it's the classic less than 10% of calories from protein that we're told is so healthy and ideal for weight management. But on it, I was only getting a max of 75 grams of protein per day, whereas in 2018, I was hitting 180. That's a huge difference. Now, if the visual is not enough for you, you should doubt me that this guy was fatter and weaker and felt crappier than the 2018 overfeeding experiment, Andrew, on higher protein intake. After all, I don't have a bodpod analysis from 2013, just a opinion of what I experienced. Luckily, you don't have to trust my biased opinion because we have science, that awesome thing that helps us figure stuff out. This review that was put out last year is an up-to-date look at all of the 25 studies that ever examined overfeeding and the role that macronutrient ratio, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, have on that overfeeding, and also had not just the effect on weight in general, but muscle mass and fat mass. And it can tell us a lot about what happened to me. It's a free article, and you should totally read it if you're interested in the subject, but I will sum it up. Study 1 was done on sedentary people, overfed by 40%. They divided them into 3 groups. One got 5% protein, the other 15, the last 25. All got an equal amount of carbohydrates. The variance was in fat. The low protein group gained significantly less weight, which sounds wonderful until you realize why. The 5% protein group, which represents a raw vegan diet or a cooked vegan diet that's not very centered on protein, actually lost muscle mass while the other groups gained muscle mass. So 119% of the weight gain in that low protein group came from fat mass. They gained less total weight, but their body composition declined. They were worse off. This study looked at men and women who had been strength training for years, and they told them to either keep doing what they were doing dietarily, or they gave them a whey protein shake to eat every day. The high protein group ate 800 more calories per day, which is a lot. You would expect them to gain a lot more body mass, whether it's fat or muscle, most likely both. Now, the high protein group did gain a little bit more muscle, and they actually lost fat, which is kind of crazy. But where did all those calories go? This kind of supports my observation that I seem to be able to eat more food when I'm eating a higher protein diet. There are a whole bunch of other interesting high protein overfeeding studies showing less fat gain and more muscle mass gain, but I'll leave those to you. I'll just read the summation of the authors of this paper. The researchers say that overfeeding on fat or carbohydrate is not the same as overfeeding on protein, and that it is commonly believed that 3,500 calories equals a pound of fat, but it is evident that this is not the case. The available research does not support that contention. Dietary protein has a protective effect against fat gain during times of energy surplus. And therefore, dietary protein may be the key macronutrient in terms of promoting positive changes in body composition.
This was mostly just an experiment, and as well to, allow me to put on a little muscle to further my partner acrobatics, but it was interesting in that this is a more extreme version of what a lot of people have to do. A lot of people diet themselves into a corner, which, as I've talked about in previous videos, they need to get themselves out of that corner. And when they do, they don't want to get super fat, understandably. And so what is the best way to do that? To overfeed with more protein and a lot of strength training, and to gain mostly muscle. And then once you've increased your metabolic rate, to go through periods of lower calorie intake interspersed with periods of higher calorie intake, and to gradually lose body fat without letting your metabolic rate dip. This is kind of the recovery period. This could be a recovery period for someone who had a suppressed metabolic rate. It's what I work on with a lot of my coaching clients, and it was nice to experience that myself because I just haven't had to really. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I hope this was informative. I think it's interesting to just show how badly I fared in that 2013 compared to how I fared now and how I feel now in comparison. I'm gonna slim down again. I'll probably get to around 180, trying to lose minimal amount of muscle when I do that. But I'm pretty content with where I am. I'm not horribly upset. I look reasonably good. And I feel good, and I'm performing amazingly athletically, so really no complaints. So just an experiment. Thought you guys might like it. See you later.
To reiterate, this is just a side note. The main reasons why you want to eat more protein is for bone health, immune function, better body composition in normal life, and if you're going to lose weight to preserve more of your muscle mass, among other reasons. So definitely add more protein to your vegan diet, regardless of whether or not you're ever going to do an overfeed like this. Watch the playlist in the corner for more info.